Welcome back, Charlie.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dale.
How you doing, man?
Good. Can you see me?
Not yet. You have to the video
Gotcha.
on. Here,
All right.
I'll do. All right. So,
I'm in my apartment here, so let me
okay. All right. Well,
get you some light here.
I'm in my home, and I haven't shaved for a few days, but we'll just get rough and ready to talk about things today, Charlie. Why don't we start with that article that you wrote that Gensler was going to be tough on Robinhood, and you were talking about that they were going to have to change their suitability and educate traders, and he wasn't even talking about fines. And I said, oh, come on, Charlie, that's like a slap on the wrist. I said, send in FINRA. And FINRA, right? Remember that? And
well, FINRA, just so you know, works for the SEC essentially.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I know. It's like the CFTC and the NFA.
Yeah.
But they slapped the biggest fine on Robinhood, I think, for a broker dealer in history. Right?
It was pretty. It was a lot of money. They were under intense pressure, obviously, to settle, and the reason why is because you rather settle it and not have to disclose it than settle it and say we are in the middle of negotiations with FINRA on a major blah 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 blah. And if you look, the S1 came out, which has voluminous disclosures, and one of the interesting disclosures is that it sort of mentions that it has some regulatory issues, but there's not a lot of meat there to that disclosure. And the reason why is because it settled the big one, and this was it.
Okay.
And this was the one that if they would have put it in the S1, we would have been talking about this until the IPO. We were going to say they face a major regulatory probe, and it would have been
that was another. Yeah, that was another motivating factor for them to settle to get the IPO
and
off.
FINRA knew it. FINRA kind of knew they had them over the barrel on that.
Yeah, well, they know that if you're licensed in anything, you're over a barrel. So anything you're regulated on, right?
Yeah, and you know what I found interesting, because I read the S1, is that until the GameStop stuff happened, and they weren't really profitable until like recently.
Yeah.
They started becoming profitable this year. Now the user growth picked up during the pandemic, no doubt about that, right?
Yeah.
But the frenzy surrounding AMC and all that definitely added to their bottom line, because they turned profitable in the first quarter. The other interesting thing I thought from the S1 is they said, now that the pandemic is ending, we might have it might impact our business negatively, because people are not going to be stuck home trading. People might have to go back to work and stuff like that. So it was some interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, there's going to be, and a lot of people do not want to go back to work. A lot of people relocated, thought they'd never have to go back to the office, and their long-term vacations when they moved out to the country, they may have to go back to their homes. Kids will go back to school, and the pandemic vacation might be over. But you brought up GameStop. You drew a parallel to the meme stocks and Freddie and FannieMae. Can you tell our viewers what the similarities are between the two? Well, I do remember, Fannie before the 2008 crisis, and it was a pretty liquid stock. I used to buy calls and puts in it. So what's the comparison here? Was it really as much of a mania in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac as in GameStop?
By the way, I'm taking my balance, and I'm taking my Balance of Nature vitamins right now.
Okay. Yeah, you looked a little. Oh, look, you're back in balance. All right. So
here's what I would say. I would say. The parallel is the sort of cult-like social media obsession of the investors, particularly the retail investors that got involved in Fannie and Freddie, it was almost this weird cult that Fannie and Freddie needed to be saved. They needed to be, released by the government. They needed to stop paying the government money, ignoring all the facts that Fannie and Freddie over the years there were scandals, accounting scandals involved in Fannie and Freddie. that they were taking unusual risks because they were essentially backed up by the government, and the government took it over because it was going to blow up, and that would have been it for the 30-year mortgage, and it was insolvent. And if you didn't pay off the bondholders, if you didn't make good on the debt, if the debt wasn't is considered AAA like it was in the past, bondholders across the world would have doubted whether we pay off, whether we were backing the U.S. Treasury bonds. So they ignore that. They would attack anybody that brought up the notion that this thing only exists and only can make money because it's backed up by the government. And so all that logic was ignored. And it was ignored for like 10 years as this thing kept going through various iterations in the Obama administration. And Trump was talking about privatizing it, even though it was extremely difficult to privatize. And then there was court cases. And all I was saying was this: the same irrational exuberance that you see around Fannie and Freddie, you are seeing in GameStop and particularly AMC, that somehow AMC is this thing that needs to be saved. It's the greatest company. It's being attacked by short sellers and want to put it out of business. No, that there are like dark forces at work that operate in dark pools that are doing naked short selling. No evidence of that. And that it's the little guy sticking it to the big guy and making markets right. And that's what all this is behind at AMC, which, now that the pandemic is waning and it's almost over here in the US, AMC stock is going to go through the moon. That's the words that these AMC, as they call themselves, apes use. And, never stop rising because people are miraculously going to go back to the movies, even though they weren't going back to the movies before the pandemic. And then there's the social media aspect of it, which is the same thing. Obnoxious, vile, disgusting trolling that goes on anybody that dares to question that investment thesis. And it's almost it's the same thing as what went on with Fannie and Freddie. And I just said, and my point was like, listen, the irrational exuberance of crowds, it went on 10 years with Fannie and Freddie. This thing could go on for a while longer. I mean, there are obviously structural differences. One of the things that kept Fannie and Freddie, kept hope alive, so to speak, Fannie and Freddie being released in a way that was positive to people who owned the common stock, which was a penny stock for even in its best days, it was trading below $5, and it was an OTC stock. Sometimes it would go as high as $5, but remember, after the takeover, it was trading at pennies, like below $1. The court cases involving that this was an illegal takeover that big hedge funds mounted. That's that was real, and that kept them hope alive. Obviously, there's not that with AMC. It's different. I mean, AMC actually is not in bankruptcy. It's not in conservatorship. It's actually a viable company so far. And the CEO actually is doing a smart thing by using this irrational exuberance around the stock to issue more stock and to pay down debt. And because he knows that this is maybe his once in a lifetime way to save the company on the backs of this mania around current shareholders small guys thinking that this thing is going to the moon. He's literally using their irrational exuberance to dilute their position in the company. And
didn't he do a conference or press call without his pants on? People were debating. When people were debating whether or not that was a PR move or not.
Somebody told me that. I just so you know, I like the guy, Adam Aron. Aaron is a really nice guy.
I think he was trying to give people like the risk disclaimer. You could lose your pants.
Maybe listen, Dave. I will give him this too. I mean, you can't really blame the company for a lot of this stuff. Listen, I think he's done some stuff that I wouldn't recommend. Like he was saying, I think they were giving free popcorn if you're a shareholder or something. It was like kind of stupid incentives, but he's done from an operational standpoint probably the right thing. He went out and actually said. They put out statements. If you buy the stock at these levels, prepare to lose everything. I mean, he said it, and they still bought it. And so what do you do with that? If you're the CEO of a company like AMC that needs cash, well, you use that irrational exuberance, and that's what he's doing.
They turned around their whole fortune with being able to finance a company with secondaries and bonds, etc. I don't think I've seen you write about this, but I'm curious because a lot of money flows going back into the big cap tech in the last few months, and there's still talk of antitrust action, and I guess there was some ruling that was favorable for Facebook earlier in the week. Do you
Yeah.
think that there's going to be any action to break up these companies under this administration? You think?
Well, you got to read tea leaves to a certain extent. Look at who they're putting in these key positions. Now, the SEC is not really a breakup. The Securities Exchange Commission, not really an entity that breaks up companies, but they put in as the head of enforcement. So under Gary Gensler, a guy, the U.S. attorney, I think from New Jersey, who was the Attorney General of New Jersey, who brought cases against Amazon, and he's been very big on those types of cases. They put in a woman, a 33-year-old woman, in the head of the FTC, who wrote a paper a couple of years ago, a law school paper, about the need to break up Amazon, and that it was this giant that needs to be broken apart before it unleashes all sorts of bad stuff on America. Although the paper was pretty scant on details about like exactly how Amazon right now is using its sort of monopoly status to raise money, to raise prices, which it's not. And one of the reasons why is because it's not really monopoly right now. I mean, Amazon does have competitors, particularly Walmart.com and others. So, these are the types of people that Joe Biden has appointed to major positions. Elizabeth Warren would love to break up Amazon. She's very key in the regulatory apparatus of the Biden administration. And I think you also have to look at who Biden is going to put in as the head of the antitrust division of the Justice Department. It's another key position in terms of
Unfilled still? Unfilled.
Unfilled. It's an acting. A lot of people are talking about the DC Attorney General, Carl Racine, who actually has brought a case against Amazon to break them up as well. So if he gets that job, the tea leaves would say regulatory assault coming. You would think there would be some sort of a market reaction. The one thing, though, I think, which investors...
Tim Cook is worried, though, Charlie. He called Nancy Pelosi, and I don't think it was for a date because of his preferences, right? So he's worried about this.
Yes, yeah. I would just say this, the courts have been much more skeptical than the regulators, right?
Yeah.
So just remember that if you go bearish on tech, the courts are saying, not so fast. Look at what happened with Facebook. Yeah. From an antitrust standpoint, you really have to turn the Bork model of antitrust, of interpreting the Sherman Act by Bob Bork on its head. You remember that was consumer harm is the sort of fundamental basis of antitrust. That's what Bob Bork, as I guess Solicitor General back in the Reagan administration, established. And as a legal scholar, remember Bob Bork, the controversial, he wasn't that controversial. He became controversial during his Supreme Court confirmation hearings, which he didn't get approved. But, that established, how we looked at antitrust law. The Biden people want to change that. A lot of these liberal progressives, including the woman that runs the FTC, Lena, I can't remember her name. It's escaping me right now. Okay. But you got to get the courts to change too. And the courts so far are not are really sticking to, adhering to the consumer harm. And if you think about it, Amazon is not harming consumers now, even if they are ready to harm it tomorrow, which is kind of what they argue. They're getting so much power, they're ready to drop the bomb on all of us. And all of a sudden your Amazon Prime ticket is going to cost $10 million. But,
okay, I thought they were only going to drop drones on us. But there could be.
Yeah, I'm just telling you that they haven't done it yet.
All right, so Charlie, I'm going to give you a platform. One of the most emotional pieces I've seen you write in a while was what you wrote this week about the indictments. I forgot the guy's name who
Helen Weisselberg, the CFO
that's right.
of the Trump organization.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about Bill Cosby's release, but I want you. It has nothing to do with the markets, right. A lot, but America's dad looked pretty frail. So anyway, why don't you tell us about your feelings about this indictment and why you feel that there's a lot of injustice on how this is happening. And if it
Well,
happened all the
I,
time to regular people, they'd be up in arms.
I don't advocate if he did what they say he did. I don't think that's a good thing. You should pay your taxes on everything. I do certainly. I just think that, and because I know a lot about this case, I've been reporting on the Cy Vance case for about a year. I was the first report that he actually assembled a task force of top forensic accountants and forensic and lawyers that are experts in tax law. He's assembled this task force to go after Donald Trump and the Trump organization. From what I understand, he's been looking at this case for 5 years. The task force was established a lot recently when they thought they were ready. The rubber was going to meet the road. So I wrote that task force story in December with my then producers now at the New York Post, Lydia Moynihan. I know that they've been spending a lot of time on this. 5 years, from what I understand, 100 subpoenas, 3 million pages of documents. And you would think if you do all that, and remember, they're looking at 4 principal people in this alleged tax fraud scheme, and it stems largely from what Michael Cohen, the former Trump fixer, who turned on him later on in his, in that famous Senate hearing, where he said that Trump would inflate the value of his assets for insurance purposes, so you cover more of the assets, deflate it for tax purposes, so you pay fewer taxes, and that was tax fraud. And the guy who knew about that was Alan Weisselberg, the CFO. That's what Mr. Cohen said. So if you spend 5 years on that, and the principal people they were looking into in that scheme would be obviously Donald Trump and his 2 sons, Don Jr. and Eric, and probably Mr. Weisselberg, because he's the CFO. Those are the principal people that run the businesses, right? I mean, there's other people involved, but those are the top ones. That's the ones you would look at. So you would think after 5 years of looking at that, where obviously Weisselberg's actions are material to your investigation, you would come up with a paper trail that points to much more than Trump being a nice guy and paying for the kids, his Weisselberg's kids' education, right? You would get more than Weisselberg stayed at a hotel, at a Trump apartment when he wasn't in Florida. You would get more than these sort of like picayune perks. And by the way,
how about the revelation that, for example, Ivanka, an employee of that company, of Trump's company, a couple million a year, also getting paid a consulting fee. I know in my career, I'm either an employee or an independent contractor as a consultant. Very unusual for
but that's not part of these charges. I don't think that's part of these charges. I have to look at the exact charges.
Yeah, they're saying that there were other people that participated in this type of scheme.
I'm just saying, listen, perks. I saw one of the
but how's that a perk? How is being paid as an employee and receiving consulting fees a perk?
I don't know. And by the way, that's not part of this case. And my point is, and I keep seeing these chats come up, Charlie, the Trump organization rips off people all over the world. Okay, but that's not part of this case. That I'm telling you that I know for a fact that the Manhattan DA, who's, by the way, the Manhattan DA, there are bullets flying in Manhattan, all over Manhattan right now. You can't, Times Square is filled with homeless. He's the top law enforcement official for the borough of Manhattan, which, has a long legacy out there. Bob Morgenthau, the great Bob Morgenthau, did this job for 50 years. He established an office that was based on integrity. He didn't bring every case that came to him. He certainly didn't bring a lot of picayune cases. You would think after all that, that we really do get a fraud case against a tax fraud case. And they didn't get it. What they got was a bunch of perks that, half of them probably are okay. I mean, listen, there are IRS carve-outs on perks. Trust me on this. I know a little bit about this. So give me more. I mean, listen, I'm all for putting them in jail. I mean,
All right.
give me. I'm just sick of prosecutors because I've seen it 1,000 times. I've covered white collar crime my entire career. I'm hardly a guy that's easy on the targets. But
Well,
I've
then,
seen
is it
them.
unusual for them to keep the grand jury open for another 6 months? Normally, after an indictment, isn't that the end of the grand jury phase, or not?
Well, depend. Well, the investigation's ongoing, and they clearly want to flip the guy. Let me
Yeah,
ask you this: use your common sense. If you
I'd
have all
I'd
these
flip
documents, you have all these documents, all this stuff on Trump and this organization.
yeah,
Why do you need him to flip?
because yeah, probably because you need corroboration
But
of
why?
what for your
Corroboration for
case.
what? You have the documents. It says what it says. I mean, why do you need him to say X, Y, and Z? I mean,
I'm not sure.
you
You
don't
you shouldn't
really.
need that. Don't in every fraud case, isn't there? To me, it seems more like a RICO case where or a
Well,
mafia
listen.
case where there.
I've seen Rudy Giuliani work RICO cases over the
Yeah,
years against Milken. I mean,
yeah,
Milken was
poor Milken.
a threatened RICO case.
Yeah, for
He
what?
had
Having an enlarged prostate or bond trading?
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot. I'm not going there, but he had
All right.
he had real evidence against him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And he
yeah,
had enough. So this is a little. They spent a lot of money on this. Trust me, this was the number one priority of the Manhattan DA was the Trump Organization tax fraud case that targeted Donald Trump himself, Don Jr.,
yeah.
Eric Trump, and principally and this guy Weisselberg, because he's the CFO. Those were the principal players. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out because those are the guys at the top. And maybe others. There's others, I'm sure, that are going to be involved. And by the way, there may be others that are charged with some of this perk stuff. I have no idea. Maybe everybody got perks that the advance doesn't like. But man, you should have something more. And you know, everybody says, well, this is just the beginning. Why would you? If you're going to do something,
Yeah,
and by the
bring
way,
your best material out up front,
you
not
just,
save it.
he's out of office in a year. Why would he bring the crap out first? He's going to leave the good stuff to his successor, right?
Yeah,
Cy
valid
Vance
point.
did not run for
That's right.
reelection. There's going to be a different Manhattan DA, and I can't tell you who it is because I don't know. But I mean, he did 3 terms and he's done. So he's leaving office, and he's coming out of the box with the dumbest case, a perk case. And by the way, the unpaid taxes is going to be it's an again. It's usually why isn't the IRS involved in this? Why isn't the
That's true.
IRS indicting Donald Trump? I mean, listen, I know he was president, but even before he was president, he was under audit. Where was the
Right.
case then? I don't. Some of this doesn't make sense. Everybody has always been questioning the taxes of the Trump organization, predating Donald Trump's presidency when Barack Obama was in the White House. Everybody was always, he's always been audited. That's why he
Yeah,
never released his taxes, which I would have loved to see this, the full thing. It would have been a great story in itself. But why isn't the IRS charging him now?
that's a great question too. Lot of Teflon on Donald Trump.
Maybe
Don't
it's
you think?
maybe listen, all these rich guys, if there was one thing I I knew it. I didn't need ProPublica to tell me, but ProPublica put out this whole thing about rich people evading taxes, right? All these multi-gazillionaires, and
Oh yeah, they're paying nothing. Yeah,
and they
yeah.
had stolen documents, and it
Yeah.
was. I think it was. I wouldn't have published it because it really didn't tell us much, but it did
It just
underscore.
pisses people off that pay taxes.
Yeah,
That was the whole reason for it, right?
yeah, right. Because we all know that rich people, get their money on capital
Passive.
gains, and
Yeah.
blah blah blah. But it did tell us that these rich guys hire lawyers to figure out, loopholes in the tax law. Okay,
They don't use TurboTax,
yes,
Charlie.
They don't use H&R Block. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just telling you that
All right.
that's what they do. And if you're in the real estate business, you do that on steroids apparently. So that's why I'm just saying I'm underwhelmed. I could be
Okay.
convinced that Mr. Weisselberg is the Wizard of Oz, and he's, controlling all the stuff, and, taking money from Russians, and, and all these
This never
miscreants
would
around
have
the
come
world.
up if Donald Trump was not president, if he had never become president. Do you think?
I see. I think that too, because I think if it was Donald Trump wasn't president, Weiss, they would have went to Weissenberg and said, uh, you owe, $1 million in backpack taxes, pay it. And here's
Hey,
a 10% fine on that. And then he
right.
could have adjudicated, he could have like challenged it or whatever, I'm just saying, it's just,
Yeah.
and by the way, no offense to anybody. I every time I see Hunter Biden, I actually feel badly for him because he was obviously a junkie. But where's the investigation into all the money he made overseas? If we're going to go down this political route, it should go both ways. Hunter Biden made a ton of money representing, doing
Different
stuff overseas,
countries.
different
Yeah.
countries. Where's the big sort of, okay, let's look at what he did, and was the old man involved in any way? Why are we doing that? I mean, it's I mean, by the way, the guy, half the time he was getting that money, he was, he was a drug addict, which, all automatically leads you to do crazy stuff. I know Donald Jr. and Eric. I think they're good guys. I like them personally, just so you know. I'm just saying this. And I have nothing against Hunter Biden. Never met him. But they're not substance abusers and everything, yet they get treated like they're criminals. I'm just telling you, there's a double standard here. Okay.
Okay. And Charlie, you know what? I'm glad that I brought this subject up because
By the way,
I
somebody
know where you
says,
stand, but
by the
I
way, I
mean you
just
make
read,
some
I want to
valid
say this.
points.
I was
Go ahead.
some guy buddy on the chat said, Charlie's a Trumper.
Right.
You don't realize how much Trump used to complain about me and Neil Cavuto, about what we've
Yeah.
said about him, and we're holding his feet to the fire. I had dinner last night with a former Trump administration, or 2 nights ago, with a former Trump administration official who will remain nameless. It was her and a few other people. We went to Del Frisco's in Manhattan, and she said, you were really nasty to Donald, to the president over the years. And I said, I wasn't nasty. I was being fair. I call balls and strikes, and this is how I do it, and I'm doing it right here as well.
Okay. I appreciate it, Charlie. And it was always great to have you on, and I'm always open to hearing all sides. And
Oh, I
you
know
have
you
to
are.
hear it.
That's why I keep
You
doing
have
this
to,
show.
yeah. I mean, you have to hear all sides because there's a few things that I wasn't considering a half an hour ago that now I think are worthy of thinking about. So
Yeah, that's all we're
thank you.
doing. Listen, a market is two views, right? Is opposing
Yeah,
views. You can't
yeah,
have a market without opposing views, and that's all I'm trying to throw out there.
yeah. I wish our government would get back to governing instead of prosecuting,
Yeah,
and get some things done. And I think that goes across party lines.
I
Let's
agree with
get
that.
America. Let's get America back to work, and end this. It's almost like we have become a entitlement riddled economy. I'd like to see America come back to the way it could be. And there is an awful lot of stuff going on that a lot of attacks on different ethnic groups and nationalities that really scare me, because it's not the America I grew up in, where
No, no.
so anyway, uh, I'd rather have you as a guest than Jesse Ventura any day. Someone just mentioned Jesse Ventura. So Charlie, have a great weekend.
You too, my friend.
I thanks for sharing your work with me on Twitter. I get it out there, and
Thank you,
I
Dale.
I think that you and I are an example that we could have opposing views and be civil about it, and not have any vitriol happening. While we come from different places, but we're open to listening, and that's the
Yep,
key.
you got it.
Thank you, Charlie.
All right, Dale, be good, my friend.
All right, that's a wrap, everyone. Hope you had a good NFP, and we got a decent number finally on your appearance. You notice I bring in on the NFP, Charlie. So we finally
Sounds
got
good.
a decent number. So
All right, sounds good to me.
all right, man.
See ya.
I'll talk to you. We'll talk next month.
You got it.
All right, that's a wrap, everyone. Have a great weekend. Okay. Adios. You could catch a team. They're going to be doing the morning edge Cheers, Paul. They'll be doing the morning edge in 11 minutes. Adios. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Ben. You too, buddy.